Shalom. I would like to give all reverence, due benevolence, worship, honor, praise, and glory unto the Most High God, whose name is Yahweh, and his only begotten Son, whose name is Yahweh Shai. This is an exhortation for you, Jakes, as always, speaking to those of you whose fathers consider themselves to be Black, Hispanic, or Native American, that you are the true Israelites according to the Bible. And once you come back into the true understanding of your heritage according to the scriptures, it is incumbent upon you to start keeping the commandments and building your faith over time. I want to exhort today out of the book of Sirach. I have an ongoing string of exhortations out of the book of Sirach, which, is a book of wisdom that we find in the scriptures. And in Sirach chapter 29, it gives us uplifting words on how to be content. Contentment is a major part of this walk. It goes hand in hand with the commandments, in that a lot of the things that we are asked to do at the mouth of the Lord by way of his word require us to be humble and satisfied with what it is that we have. So we can't be greedy and we can't look for unjust gain. For example, there are a couple commandments that tell us that we can't take bribes, because a gift perverteth the heart of the wise and also skews judgment. The scriptures also tell us that we cannot lend upon usury to our brethren, meaning you can't lend $100 and ask for 120 back, or 125 back, or 130 back, things of that sort. So, in doing so, when people do things like that, it's because they're looking to fill their pockets. They're looking to feed their egos as well, in some instances. We're supposed to be content. So if you've got yourself a roof over your head, clothes on your back, food in your stomach, and you're protected from the outside ills of the world, such as gun violence, gang violence, the adverse weather, then you should consider yourself very fortunate. And whatever it is you have, be satisfied with it. And if you want more, which is not a crime to necessarily try to upgrade your life to an extent, then you have to be willing to put in the work. So this is the book of Sirach, chapter 29. Sirach in the Apocrypha, also known as Ecclesiasticus. This is the book of Sirach, chapter 29. And verse number 21, it says, "The chief thing for life is water and bread and clothing and a house to cover shame. Better is the life of a poor man in a mean cottage than delicate fare in another man's house." And that's very important because, as I said, the principal things in life are what we need to survive. And when you're put in certain life situations, you'll realize that when you have those chief things, it is a blessing like none other. If you've ever been or can envision yourself on the brink of homelessness, for example, especially when you're out in the cold in the freezing wintertime and you don't know where your next meal is going to come from, and you may not have adequate clothing to protect yourself, you'll look back on the times where you may have had an apartment. It may not have been luxurious or anything like that. It may not have been very desirable, but you had an apartment. You had a refrigerator where you could put some food in. You had a mattress. You had a bed that you could sleep in. And at the least, you were protected from, like I said, the ills of the outside world. When you're brought low and you're abased, it changes your perspective to where you appreciate the simpler things in life, the essential things in life. And it makes the heart better. Reading on. And before doing that, in verse 22, where it says, "Better is the life of a poor man in a mean cottage than delicate fare in another man's house." Right. So even though we also have laws in the commandments where if our brother approaches us, if our brother approaches us wanting to live with us because he's down on his luck, then we are required to open our arms wide unto him and give him sufficient for his need. That's in the commandments. I believe that's in the book of Exodus. However, you don't want to make it a habit of living in other men's houses, because when you do so, you don't have any jurisdiction over the things that you can do on a daily basis. Just think about it. If you're under somebody else's roof, they can tell you to pretty much do whatever it is that they want you to do. And if you don't do it, they can just kick you out. So they could be like, all right, if you want to stay with me, then you have to take out the trash this day, this day, this day. You also can't bring anybody over. You can't make noise past this certain time. You can't do this. You can't do that. If you're trying to make a living under that roof, and it conflicts with the things that they need to do, you're disrupting them, then that could be a conflict of interest as well. So delicate fare in another man's house is you trying to catch a come up and save money by living under somebody else's roof, living delicately, rather than just thugging out being poor for a little while. Of course, using the word thugging just as a colloquialism, not to actually be a thug and partake in nefarious activity. But rather than just toughing out a poor life, and then, as I said, working towards getting what it is that you need at a better capacity. So beware of that as well. Verse 23, be it little or much, wholly contented, that thou hear not the reproach of thy house. So if you're not content, that means that you're going to do what? You're going to murmur, you're going to complain, and nobody wants to hear that. Who wants to hear a person who constantly just complains about the things that are going on in their life and what they don't have? You sound like an ingrate. We're not supposed to be ungrateful. Matter of fact, I believe it tells us that in the book of 1 Timothy chapter 3, one of my favorite chapters. Bear with me a moment if I can find that precept. 2 Timothy chapter 3. This is 2 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 2. It says, for men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy. So if you're unthankful, that means that, you're not approaching the Lord 3 times a day and thanking him for the essential things in life. You're not approaching the Lord and giving him his just glory and just due. Instead, you're now complaining under your breath about, oh, I don't have this, I don't have that. My life is terrible. Of course, poverty is not easy, and it is a weary to the mind, it is wearisome to the mind, and you're not just going to have a giant smile on your face all the time, because there's a lot of things you can't do when you're poor. Like, it may limit the amount of health care that you may be have access to. You may not be able to eat healthy foods as often because you can't afford them, because, vegetables and stuff like that, there's a reason why impoverished communities have so many fast food restaurants, liquor stores, things like that, because they're cheap, but they destroy the body. So it's very important that we remain thankful and that we're not murmurers and complainers. And I believe there's another precept as well in the epistles that tells us about, or tells us to beware of murmurings. Excuse me. Bear with me while I try to find that precept as well. Yeah, I'll just paraphrase for the sake of time, but when you read the epistles, of Paul and of Peter, they pretty much tell us not to be murmurers and complainers. So, very important, very important. Reading on in the book of Sirach, Sirach chapter 29 and verse 24. Now it says, "For it is a miserable life to go from house to house, for where thou art a stranger, thou darest not open thy mouth." Right. So, of all those things that I mentioned, the rules and restrictions that someone who houses you and shelters you, takes you in, may place upon you, you can't question them. I mean, you could try to plead your case, but if they tell you even one time that it's their way or the highway, then you got to abide by that. Otherwise, you got to find somewhere else to stay, and you'll be miserable because then you're gonna be hopping from one couch to the next, and then you're just gonna be known as that dude who doesn't have his own crib, doesn't have his own stuff. And again, while it's not good to trivialize poverty and someone who's down on their luck, especially if you're someone who's taking proactive steps, you may just get a job and now you're just working to get some change in your pocket so that you can then go get your own place, somewhere to stay. But don't go from house to house. Very miserable life. Very miserable. Thou shalt entertain and feast and have no thanks. Moreover, thou shalt hear bitter words. Come, thou stranger, and furnish a table, and feed me of that thou hast ready. Give place, thou stranger, to an honorable man. My brother cometh to be lodged, and I have need of mine house. So, again, let's say you're staying with someone and you're both in a 2-bedroom apartment, and your friend is like, all right, you could take the bedroom. If he's got a brother or a friend, an honorable man who he holds in high esteem, and they're like, yo, I'm in town, what's up? He could very well be like, all right, it's time for you to bounce. You have to get out of my crib now because I have someone else who I need to shelter, and you've been here too long. Or he just needs to come stay here. He takes precedent over you. So this is why contentment is very important, because something that can befall you is if you're not content, the Lord can take from you what you already have and place you in a situation like this, where now you have to look to others and essentially you become a beggar. Finishing out, it says, "These things are grievous to a man of understanding, the upbraiding of a house room and reproaching of the lender." So when you borrow from your neighbor, then they can reproach you straight to your face. So it's important to be content. And just in another part of Sirach 29, I want to get some uplifting precepts before closing out. It says, "Help the poor for the commandment's sake, and turn him not away because of his poverty." That's Sirach 29 and verse 9. I'll read it again. "Help the poor for the commandment's sake, and turn him not away because of his poverty." So make sure that if your brother approaches you and they come to you with a very sincere reason as to why they may need some change, that you don't turn them away. This is not to say that you just give money out to every single homeless person or person who's down on their luck who approaches you on the street or things like that, because then you'll run out of money by the end of the day. But what it does mean is, let's say your brother approaches you, someone who's down on their luck, and they don't take up much of your time. They don't give you a sob story, and they're not out here looking for money so that they can then go flipping on some drugs or something like that. But they're there may be an instance where someone's looking to they have to take a trip, and they don't have enough money to get on the bus or something like that. And then they explain to you it's a dire situation, or they may just be starving, and you give them $1, $2, and that helps them get some water and food for a day. They may have a child with them, and they say, "I'm down on my luck, I'm homeless," things like that. So make sure that you're moving in that regard with open arms. And I'll close out with verse 14. This is Sirach 29 and verse 14. It says, "An honest man is surety for his neighbor, but he that is impudent will forsake him." So Make sure that you're just moving with neighborly love, kindness, and brotherhood and sisterhood for you sisters as well, because the commandments and wisdom apply to you as well. So that's about chapter 29. Got a couple precepts in the epistles. I hope that this exhortation was uplifting, pretty brief exhortation, and that it always helps you put in perspective that contentment is the way to go. When you're content, you won't be egotistical, you won't be lofty, you won't be puffed up. You'll learn to appreciate what you have so that it's not taken from you. And you'll understand that when in times of straits, that you'll know how to carry yourself around others if you need to have a helping hand extended unto you so that you're not put to shame. With that, I say shalom, Israel. Stay content. Be content with what you have. Don't chase riches. Shalom.